Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to my channel. My name is Sarah, and today I'm going to be telling the story of my strange therapist from when I was a child. There were a few things that this man did that were odd, that I knew at the time, but now looking back as an adult, it's even more odd, and I would just like to make a video talking about it. So I was 12 years old, for some context, and I had been asking my mom to find me a therapist for quite some time. I just felt like, I don't know, I just felt like I had issues that I didn't know how to handle. I didn't know what my issues were, and I wanted somebody to listen to me and pay attention to me. That's really probably what I wanted. For some more context, I specifically asked my mom to find me a male therapist, which now looking back is like sign number one. Sign of what? I don't know. Basically, I'm going to be talking about my therapist being weird and possibly predatory, but we'll get into it. I wanted a male therapist because as a child, as a 12-year-old, this is not how I think now, but back then, this is what I thought. I felt like the older women in my life were quite pushy, and I felt like they were high anxiety and they weren't present with me. And I felt like, I don't know, I just felt like older women with a younger woman, like, this was just my perspective as a child, like, had this habit of giving advice. Like, they couldn't just sit with you and be with you. They had to like constantly be this like beacon of wisdom and try to change you and fix you and make it so that, you don't make all the bad decisions that they made, blah, blah, blah. And I see this sometimes still, where I feel like older people they can't just be with a younger person. They have to force their life experience and their wisdom onto younger people. And that's kind of how I felt about the women in my life. I felt like the older male figures, were just more present with me as a child and were more willing to hear me out rather than just be so quick to give me advice or, I don't know, I guess pushy is kind of the word for lack of a better term. But I don't feel this way anymore about women. I have a very different perspective. I know that there's a lot of factors, societal factors, childhood things, all things that feed into preferring to be around one gender or the other. And now I know that it's not all black and white. But back then, as a child, I struggled to get along with older women, and I felt like I had better luck getting along with older men. So I asked my mom to find me a male therapist. So this man, right off the bat, was not the right fit for me. I should have known that at the start. He had a home practice. Okay, so I would go to his basement. It wasn't weird. Like, he had a whole office, like a real setup in his basement. It was very nice, actually, for his practice, his clients, whatever. I'm pretty sure he wasn't a psychologist. I think he was just a social worker. But he had a dog, like a white, crusty dog. And I am not a dog person. And back then, was not a dog person. And that's a whole other topic of feeling like, I don't know if if bringing your dog into your client's therapy sessions is really appropriate. Then again, so many people love dogs and benefit a lot from a dog being around. So he probably thought, especially initially, like, oh, 12-year-old girl, I'll have the dog come out and jump all over her and it'll make her so comfortable, right? And be great. But that was not the case. I'm not a dog lover, especially a jumpy, smelly dog. When I'm trying to focus on talking to a therapist. And that's hard because it's like he's working from home specifically so that he can be with his dog, I'm assuming. It's like right off the bat, not the right fit for me, because then I don't like the dog, and then he has to put the dog in the crate, and then I'm sitting there with a sad dog in the crate, and I have to watch the dog be sad, and I'm like guilt-ridden for being the mean person that has to put the dog in the crate. And I'm sure the therapist is like low-key resenting me because I have you don't like my dog. I know that this is all a lot, like, a little extreme of an evaluation. It may not really go that deep, but I do think to a certain extent, it's like, okay, right off the bat, a therapist who works with his dog in the room, not the right fit for me. Then let's get to the actual therapy part. There wasn't much therapy. There was actually no therapy. The session was for him. It was all him. He talked about himself the whole time. I could not get a word in. And it was just constant. And it got to the point where I had heard some of his stories many times because he was like a rambling grandpa. Like, he was quite old. He was certainly a senior citizen. He had adult children. Yeah, just rambling, telling the same stories over and over again. He didn't really seem to have much interest in what I said. Yeah, it was just right off the bat talked about himself. And it got worse, actually. As the sessions went on, it just became more and more about him and a place for him to talk about himself. And he would talk to me about adult topics as well, which is where this video is going. So I would normally go in alone, but there was a time where I had my mom come in with me, and my mom saw firsthand just how inappropriate he was with the amount that he was talking about himself, but then also the topics that he was talking to me about. For example, he told me as a 12-year-old girl, oh, me and my daughter are so close. My daughter is so close to me that she confided in me about her husband's impotency. My mom loves to tell this story, but, I had heard that story before. My mom was hearing it for the first time, but he had told me that before. And I knew that men, like, I knew about male anatomy at that point, but I didn't know the word impotency. I think it went over my head a little bit, but I knew that he was talking to me about complex marriage dynamics between his daughter and her husband and inappropriate things. I was able to grasp that. And after a while of hearing the same story, I knew what he was talking about and I knew what it meant. And at the time I didn't think so much of it, but now I'm kind of like, these just aren't topics for a 12-year-old girl to be hearing about. Even just the concept of marriage to a 12-year-old is a hard one to grasp. I'm not going to grasp these dynamics between an impotent husband and a wife and then the father's intervention. Yeah, looking back, that was a weird one. And my mom heard that and was like, what on earth are you talking to my daughter about? And then I don't know if it was in the same session that this happened, because I went in with my mom again I think I went in with my mom maybe once or twice, but I was usually alone. But I went in with my mom. He actually cried about his own childhood problems, and he was very biased. He was not a neutral party. My mom and I were having a conflict about something that she wanted me to do, and I didn't want to go through with it. To be more specific, I did not want to be confirmed in the Catholic Church. But my mom had spent all this money and all these years raising me Catholic that she wanted me to get my confirmation. But I, as a 12-year-old, maybe I was 13, turning 13, close to 13, I was like, I am not a Catholic. None of this has any value to me. I hate it, and I don't want to get my confirmation. So we brought it to the therapist. He starts he was trying to heal some wounds from his own childhood, and he started crying. He was like, this is hard for me to talk about, which I'm not bashing him for crying. I just think it's ironic when a therapist starts crying to the client about their own problems, and this client there was no progress. Like, this man did not help me with anything. I'm still extraordinarily ill. But yeah, he did not help me with anything and never listened to me. And then all of a sudden, he's crying about his own problems. It's like, who really needs the therapist here? When I was a child, I was really self-conscious, and I didn't want to get my picture taken. But all my mother wanted was pictures of me. And now she's dead, and there's no pictures of me, and I never did that for my mother, and now she's dead, and I have to live with that I never took any pictures for my mother. And he was like, you have to do this for your mother, Sarah. You have to do this. This is something she wants for you. It was just very bizarre. It was very biased. It was very weird, and me and my mom were just sitting there like, are you seeing this? This is very weird. There's also the cynical part of me that's kind of like, well, your mom is not here anymore. Like, you don't really need those pictures now. I think now is time to get over it. But again, everybody grieves in different ways and has different regrets about people they lost and all that. So I'm not going to get too into, solving his problem. But I did feel like, he's holding on to something, and why am I hearing about it? Me, a 12-year-old, and my mom going through our own conflict, and he's kind of pushing something on us. And regardless of this weird conversation, my mom actually canceled him, fired him, decided to stop taking me there when he had the impotency conversation. And she called him and said, you shared too much personal information with my child. And I agreed at the time. Like, at the time, I was like, yeah, he always talks about himself. It's weird. I knew way more about him and his life than he knew about me, which I feel like is not how therapy should work at all. You should know minimally about your therapist, just basic things and maybe special things that they tell you, but otherwise, you shouldn't know all of their dumb stories by heart the way you do with your grandpa or something. This last thing, there was one thing he said that stuck with me forever that I never really talked to anyone about. Over the last few years, I've opened up with some of my friends about what he said, but I didn't at the time, because at the time I knew that it was weird and I didn't want to rock the boat. I didn't want to bring attention to it. But there was a time when I was in his office, usual session by myself, and he was trying to tell me that I could open up to him about anything. He was like, you can talk to me about whatever you want. You know, you could talk to me about school, you could talk to me about friends, you could talk to me about like the changes going on in your body. And it just makes me cringe to think about it. And like, it was embarrassing to say for a long time. But looking back, I'm like, I was a child. Like, there's no reason for me to be embarrassed to tell this story. He should be the one who's embarrassed. And I brought this up to one of my friends who had studied social work and had done some social work. And she was like, you know, it's totally fine if you wanted to talk about that. And, you know, he should be open to that. But to suggest it is weird, to kind of encourage that conversation. And I do think that that was predatory. Like, looking back, I'm like, why does an old man need to talk to a child about the changes going on in their body? The only person who should be commenting on that is a science textbook. I'm sorry. It's weird. It's predatory. You don't say that to a child. You don't tell a little girl, a grown man does not tell a little girl, oh yeah, tell me about the changes going on in your body. And yeah, I don't think I've ever told my mom that, but just absolutely strange. And I look back and I just think that it was predatory. And I think that he wanted to talk to me about inappropriate topics to gauge my reaction, or to push the limit, or to take it further. I did ignore that, like when he said that. And I knew that it was weird. And I was not about to talk to him about the changes going on in my body. But yeah, I guess this is just like my warning to parents out there that, you know, you really can't trust anyone around your children. And it's definitely a hard thing because your children are not going to come forward and say this person has been inappropriate with me. Because one, they don't want to make a big scene. They don't want to send anyone to jail. They don't want to look like a rat. And also, they don't want to get in trouble themselves. And also, they just don't want to, they just can't always gauge how inappropriate something really is. And also, there was another thing with this where it was like, I had asked my mom to take me to therapy for a long time, and she initially was not really super enthusiastic about it. She was kind of like, why do you want to go to therapy? Like, I had to ask for quite a while before she actually took me. So I kind of felt like, well, if I tell her that he sucks and he's inappropriate and talks about himself all the time, that there's kind of going to be this like, I told you so moment where it was like, well, and I mean, that's kind of what happened. I mean, it wasn't an I told you so moment, but my mom didn't find me another therapist. I never went back. And still to this day, as an adult, I've never gone back because I had a weird experience. Not that I'm against going again, I just kind of left a sour taste in my mouth. And I just have different views of therapy now than I did back then, where I thought like this will be the thing that helps me and cures me. Whereas now I know that it's not black and white. You are the thing that helps you and cures you. And therapy can be a tool to help you through that. But there is no magical therapist who's going to come in and save your life. I mean, maybe some of you have had that experience, but I think just generally, people are predators. People who work in industries with children are predators. Like, it doesn't matter. You know, I had a bad experience with pediatricians as well, and I do want to talk about that in another video. But people think, oh, because they're a professional, they're a doctor, they're a therapist, they're this, that. It's like people who are predators specifically get into these fields. And parents need to realize this, that just because someone is a doctor or a professional of some kind or whatever, they've been doing this for 30 years, you know, all of these things, it doesn't mean that they're not a predator. It doesn't mean that they're safe. And I don't really know what the solution is, because we need pediatricians and we need childhood therapists and we need people who are in close proximity with children, but it's just impossible to filter out. I guess you just have to have some sort of eagle vision and just never fully put your trust in somebody. I don't know if my therapist would have ever tried anything inappropriate with me. But we were locked in a room together for 55 minutes or however long the session is. And I was a child and he was a grown man. And, who knows? Who knows? That was the extent of his inappropriate behavior, but it was weird. And I guess I just wanted to share that story and warn others about professionals in industries with children. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any comments. I definitely would love to hear anybody's perspective. Do you think what he said about my changing body was predatory? Or do you think that he was just trying to be welcoming? It's hard to tell. Maybe some of you have a different perspective. Let me know.